Good morning, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today to talk a bit about my use of organic acid testing. Don't go too far, just in case I click this the wrong way. Organic acid testing in my clinical practice. Okay. So a little bit about me for those of you that haven't seen me speak before, or perhaps I'm meeting you for the first time. So I graduated from BCNH in 2008, and I've been in clinical practice for now actually 12 years. Full-time practitioner, I'm very proud to tell you. And I have tended to focus within the irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease, and gut disorder kind of arena. But as you all know, that death begins in the colon. So almost any health condition that you care to mention is exacerbated or improved if you have decent gut function. So I tend to find that I go much beyond the kind of the IBS picture. So currently, I'm starting to see long COVID patients. They're starting to trickle through to my practice. And I have been using organic acid testing as a way of lifting the bonnet, to use Alenka's analogy earlier on about, car servicing. And so when the first patient started to head my way, I found myself thinking, oh my gosh, what does this mean for me? What do I need to do with these patients? And very quickly I felt reassured, because I thought there were so many parallels between long COVID and dealing with people with post-viral syndromes, which I've become very accustomed to over the 12 years that I've been in practice. But it's fair to say there are some quirks around long COVID and COVID patients that we haven't really seen before. And I think what is very helpful and what's very interesting is that there's just a huge body of research at the moment in this area, and there's barely a day that goes by where there isn't a new paper with a new emphasis or a new finding about COVID and what it does and how it affects the body. And I think we're starting to realise that long COVID is much more than a respiratory infection. It's not just a flu, it's not just a cold. It's actually, a multi-systems virus that has dramatic effects on all different parts of the body. And so one of the first things that I did when just trying to get my head around how to work with my my new patients that were coming through was to start to look at some of the research. So this was just a paper that I found in the Natural Medicine Journal on post-acute COVID syndrome. And I just really wanted to make sense of kind of some of the accounts of symptoms that I was hearing about. So I see a lot of people that have got fatigue, chronic fatigue, but I was also seeing these kind of heart palpitations, these headaches, these migraines. This kind of histamine picture was definitely kind of coming through with my patient demographic. From the same paper, actually, this just goes into a bit more detail about the types of things that you could expect to see. And I just highlighted in yellow what I see most often. So I'm definitely seeing these symptoms very much associated with inability to be able to exercise effectively, people being dramatically fatigued, unable to do even the most basic things for themselves. And I'm seeing lots of palpitations and chest pain, fatigue, muscle aches, all over aching, headaches, dysautonomia, definitely that's coming through. One patient had a very reduced kidney function. I'm seeing thyroiditis, definitely that's coming through. And then, as you would expect, I'm particularly attuned to what's happening with gut microbiome picture, because I'm an IBS type person, specialist. And so what I'm seeing is I'm seeing people that previously had seen me months and months before for SIBO that we've successfully resolved. They get back in touch, it's back, can you help me? And when I go back through their history, fill me in since we last spoke, what's been going on with you? And very quickly, I started to ask questions around, have you had COVID? What was your experience? How quickly did your SIBO recur after having COVID? And I started to see this picture around the gut function, as well as actually SIBO recurrence. I was also seeing Candida infections, and actually relapses of inflammatory bowel disease as well. So I was really getting a picture that whatever was going on definitely was happening in the gut too. And also seeing some hair loss in some of my patients. So this is another paper just looking at the mechanism of play behind COVID. And this is kind of what I was feeling I was seeing in patients. So this persistent inflammation playing out in multiple different ways, reactivation of pathogens. And in fact, one of my case studies, you'll see that we've got kind of lots of viruses that are reactivated in her. And then definitely the microbiome alterations. So dramatic shifts in the balance of commensal flora in an individual's gut. Some autoimmunity, the Hashimoto's thyroiditis we've been seeing, and then poor glycemic control. I've seen people have real struggles with blood sugar. And actually, just as an aside, one of the things that I found most helpful with these particular patients is stabilizing their blood sugar, really reducing carbohydrate intake. Giving them good glycemic control makes them feel a lot better. So what's happening in my patients then? So starting to see these kinds of pictures, and I've kind of just categorized them just to make this a little bit simpler. So systemic inflammation, I've touched on neuroinflammation, starting to see anxiety off the charts, people that had never really been anxious before, just literally feeling, Tracey, I'm going out of my mind, as I just can't stop myself ruminating, thinking about this. Fatigue, I've touched on already, brain fog, poor cognition, inability to function, can't sit and read anything for any length of time. Mitochondrial dysfunction, again, fatigue, blood sugar all over the place, dysautonomia, issues with digestive tract, SIBO recurrence, I would say, would be part of that. I haven't seen so much menstrual changes. I've seen a couple of patients that have had a menstrual cycle disappear for a month or two and then re-establish, but that hasn't been too much of a problem. Palpitations, definitely seeing lots of palpitations, headaches, reflux, brain fog. The rest I've touched on. Oh, damage to barriers. So definitely seeing leaky gut, and then the viral reactivation that I touched on earlier. So with every person, of course, I've got a full health questionnaire completed, which they do in advance of seeing me. And so from their health questionnaire, before I even speak with them for the first time, I'm starting to pick up some clues about what's going on. So I'm looking at kind of previous history, looking at things like any environmental exposures they might have. Obviously, their symptoms picture appears very prominently on the health questionnaire that they complete. I look at any previous test results that they might have, that they might present, or obviously any testing that I do with them as well. I look at whether they are at a good weight for their height, and actually the composition of their body from the point of view of they carrying their weight around the middle. Do we think there might be a metabolic syndrome aspect at play? And then one of the questions that I always ask if it's not been filled out on the health questionnaire is, do you get hay fever? Do you have allergies? Are you an itchy person? Do you think you're allergic? You know, and that kind of very quickly, but people don't always think to put that down. But when you start asking about it, then you very quickly get this picture of this kind of atopic family and this kind of very much this histamine presentation. And then history, not only theirs, but obviously their family history of anything autoimmune that's going on. And then, of course, any infectious burden, whether that is viruses, whether that might be Lyme disease, whether it's Candida, whether it's SIBO. So in order to help me lift the bonnet on these people, I have been choosing to use organic acid testing alongside other testing, to be fair. So I will often also do a stool test. I might also do a blood panel. It really just depends on how far someone's budget can stretch. But I think this is a really great test, particularly the larger the test, the better value these particular organic acid profiles are. And you just get this really great picture across the whole body of what is going on at a cellular level. And I think that's really super important, because I think what's really so obvious about long COVID is that there's just this huge disparity from people that can have COVID and shrug it off in 3 days, versus other people who lose their lives to it. So it's like, how can that happen? You know, so we know from functional medicine and our training that it's not so much a bug that gives us the disease, it's the bug and the environment, the terrain, that will give us the presentation of the disease or the severity of the disease. And I think that's never been truer than long COVID. So why wouldn't we use something like an organic acid profile to get some kind of the inside track on how the person is functioning? So this is my first case. So this is Miss C. She's age 28. Now, I've got quite a long history with this lady, actually, because I'd actually seen her about 4 years before she got COVID. And we'd done some work on her gut function, funny enough. And most people that come to see me will end up being SIBO tested at some point or other, because I can't seem to stop myself from SIBO testing everyone. So she'd had SIBO that we'd addressed some years before. And then, you know, when people get well, you don't see them. And then she popped up out of the blue one day because she had got long COVID and she'd been to see a specialist doctor who was trained in functional medicine. And he said, I can't do all of this diet stuff myself. I think you really need to see a functional medicine trained nutritionist. I've got someone in mind. And she said, who do you recommend? And he said, me. And she said, I know her already. So then she's back, which is great because I already had previous history with her. We'd done a load of stuff together. We'd done a whole heap of testing. I'd actually also got genetic information for her because we had kind of gone down the pathway of looking at some of her genes way back when as well. So I had quite a lot of background information on her. But just to give you a bit of a lowdown of what else was going on with her. So she's from an atopic family, long history of environmental allergies, dust allergies, respiratory issues, hay fever from very young, from 8 years old. She had acne as a teenager and was given Roaccutane. So, you know, straight away, I'm sure all the bells are ringing for everyone in the room. So what we're thinking about what's going on here with insult on the gut flora, you know, what do we think about her microbiome? Her IBS symptoms came on after a course of antibiotics, which obviously I knew about. She had some food intolerances to gluten and lactose, and she thought some other things. Of course, she had been sensitive to FODMAPs as well because she'd had SIBO. In June 2012, she had a glandular fever infection. So there we've got another virus, or Epstein-Barr virus there. And she was experiencing a lack of vitality and energy following glandular fever. And she also had another virus on board, which is herpes simplex 2, which was quite active, actually. And in fact, she's had 2 outbreaks since January of this year. And then in February 2020, she caught COVID and was diagnosed with long COVID. So she also has a tendency to POT, so that is very low blood pressure. So she can feel very wobbly very easily. And she's susceptible to all colds and flus. So she feels like her immune system doesn't work. So other information on her now, because she's been seeing a specialist, she's getting all of these additional labs run as well. So these are not necessarily the ones that I would be running, but this is information that's kind of filtered through to me from the other doctors that she's been seeing. So you can see here, there's been quite an extensive workup looking at the kind of the histamine picture. In particular, really just trying to categorize whether she's a histamine intolerance or she's a mast cell activation. And then we can see also that we've got a reactivated Epstein-Barr virus in here. Then we've got diamine oxidase in red, which is 9.7, which looks like it's borderline being just under 10, but really you want DAO to be much higher. You want it to be sort of 25, 30 to really feel like this person doesn't have this issue. So definitely DAO looks problematic, and I'll show you one of the reasons why that would be. TSH, you can see where actually she's just starting with a bit of autoimmunity. So very slightly thyroid peroxidase antibodies slightly raised. This is her histamine pathway taken from her 23andMe that she did all that time ago. And I love a bit of a pathway. I think that's why I like organic acid testing. But what we can see here is, so histamine gets broken down through different pathways. The one that we always think about is diamine oxidase pathway, which is obviously inside the GI tract. And you can see here she's heterozygous. So the DAO gene, the enzyme is impacted. So heterozygous is probably about a 40% downregulation of ability. But also with histamine, we've got other pathways that need to be considered. So we've also got the HNMT pathway, which is the pathway outside of the GI tract. And we can see here that she's got a heterozygous MAL-B mutation. And also this pathway is dependent on some key nutrients like zinc and vitamin C and other B vitamins. And then of course we've got a slow running acetylation pathway that runs on B5. That's running very slowly. Can you see also, you might be able to see the writing in orange, hot orange. So basically these pathways are impaired also if there is excessive stress hormone, any inflammation, any lipopolysaccharides, so think SIBO, any infection, bacteria, histamine containing foods. So we're getting a picture that this histamine situation is very real for her for a variety of reasons, because we've got all of these pathways that are somewhat impacted. So then this is her, this is the front page of her organic acid profile. And if I'm honest, I would say that this is what I was expecting to see. So I had really thought already she's chronically inflamed, there's going to be oxidative stress, oxidative damage. And in fact, on this traffic light system, you can see that the oxidative stress looks like a bright red button right at the very top. And the scoring system is very nice actually to work with a patient and have this kind of running order of, you know, areas of focus, things that we need to be looking at. So you can see straight away we've got this oxidative stress component followed very closely by mitochondrial dysfunction. So those two are feeding each other. Then methylation imbalance. So I can also tell you from her genetics that she's an MTHFR homozygous 1298. So there is some slight issues regarding the methylation pathway for her. And I can also tell you that she's got, if this genetic stuff means anything to anyone, but she's also got some CBS mutations. So that means that her ability to make glutathione is compromised, and you'll see that shows up beautifully in this chart. So let's do a bit of a deeper dive. So then looking at the second page of this, you can see, not surprisingly, that she's got a huge need for antioxidants, both water soluble and also fat soluble. So vitamin C very much required, alpha lipoic acid, glutathione, plant-based antioxidants. So her body is just basically saying, please calm everything down, make me less inflamed. B vitamins, actually, riboflavin B2, slightly borderline higher requirement. Actually, it's bordering on the red, to be honest. So B2 required, and B12, so very important for methylation. That definitely is needed at a much higher level. And then magnesium is borderline low, and zinc is kind of heading up towards the higher zone. Her omega-3 fatty acids look okay. And then GI support, this is suggesting perhaps a requirement for digestive enzymes and microbiome support, 25 billion CFUs. The vitamin D look fine, actually. Just a normal requirement of 1,000 IU a day. And her amino acids, quite a few zeros, but definitely there are some key areas of focus here where there are some amino acids that she needs more of, notably methionine, of course. So we've got those issues around methylation and all of that process. Glutamine, lysine, which is interesting given her viral picture. So then we've got the next page of this, looking at malabsorption. We can see actually it doesn't look too bad. Malabsorption looks fine. Indole acetic acid, phenylacetic acid, they look normal. But we are definitely seeing a dysbiosis picture. So we've got a bacterial picture and not so much of a yeast. She's just about borderline for the arabinose marker, which is synonymous with candida. And then looking at the branch chain metabolites, her B-vits are largely in the green zone. Would be nice to have them a little bit further over, but actually they don't look too bad. And her folate and B12 here look okay. So fatty acid metabolism, She does okay with adipic and suveric acid. That looks fine. Oh, pyruvic acid is a little bit on the low side, so we know she's got that increased need for magnesium. And her energy markers, yeah, so we've also got the succinic acid markers as well. So we need to think about magnesium, perhaps carnitine, perhaps B2. So all of these are the nutrients that are kind of flagged up by this very helpful report as being a requirement. I did wonder about with the brain fog element, whether we might see something in the chorionic pathway, but actually that all looks really very nice. And her catecholamines are actually the low end of normal, so it could be slight underconversion of HCA to VMA. Again, probably blocked by infections and stress. And then just on the toxin and detox markers on this page, plastics looks okay, the styrene looks all right. MTBE, a marker obviously petrol compounds, she's a city liver. So it does look a bit like there's some detoxification requirement. This is slightly pixelated, sorry about this. Her amino acids, they look reasonable actually, this is not so bad. One that really kind of jumps out at you is the taurine marker. So I did check with her that she wasn't drinking Red Bull or any other type of energy drinks, and she wasn't, and neither was she supplementing taurine. But I think the answer was really in her genetics. I think with the CBS mutation that she was carrying, she also had a GST1 SNP as well. So I think she's preferentially pushing towards the taurine pathway at the cost of the glutathione pathway, which is why she has a need for glutathione. So the essential amino acids look reasonably okay. The non-essential amino acids, as we heard earlier, they're the low end of normal, so these are associated with the need for some of the B vitamins, but perhaps a bit more protein overall. I'll also tell you on this one. So largely a lot of these markers look quite nice. From her diet perspective, I'll come on to what the diet interventions at the moment, but she's not a vegetarian and she's not vegan. She will eat meat and fish, but she preferentially eats fish over meat. So these peptide markers are basically a picture of the proteins that she chooses to have. And I think anserine comes from kind of poultry, that kind of thing. So not surprisingly, that seemed to be very low. What we also have to bear in mind is her ability to be able to digest and absorb. So although her digestion section looked fine, what we have to think about is that digestion really only works when you're in a calm environment and you're able to digest and absorb well. So if you're stressed out and you're doing things on the fly, then your digestion is likely to be compromised. So it doesn't necessarily follow that digestive enzymes and stomach acid wouldn't be helpful. So oxalate markers, glyceric acid, a little bit on the low side, but otherwise no real oxalate issues. Look at the antioxidant section, the oxidative stress markers. Glutathione is probably just about to fall off the red bar there, so it's 449, very low indeed. CoQ10 looks okay. So she's starting to show some damage to her cell membrane. So lipid peroxidases is borderline at the moment, but there's the 8-hydroxydeguanosine actually is in the normal zone. So it doesn't look like there's DNA damage, but there's definitely some issues with the fatty outer ring of the cell. So coming on to her essential fatty acids, we can see here that I always kind of cut to the chase and look at the bottom box, the cardiovascular risk. And we can see here that we've got a borderline level omega-3 index where she's in the yellow zone. And if we kind of pull that apart a little bit, we can see that she's definitely consuming some omega-3 sources. So, so she's getting some fish and some flax and some walnut. And actually her overall percentage of omega-3s doesn't look too bad. She's certainly focusing on her omega-9, so she's having olive oil. And her saturated fats, on the whole, I think don't look too bad at all. there's a little bit of stearic acid is a bit on the high side, but other than that, I think that section is okay. Her omega-6 fatty acids are all a bit low, so it's almost like she's not eating a lot of sources of omega-6, which include vegetable oils, grains, most meats, because she's not having too much meat, and she's not having much in the way of dairy either. So for that reason, she's not picking up a lot of quality omega-6. Obviously, there's an awful lot of damaged omega-6 out there, which we steer our patients away from. Trans fats look nice and low, 0.27. And very helpfully, what we can see here through this fatty acid metabolism diagram is that the delta-6 desaturase activity is very much impaired. And if we consider why that might be, we can see that the nutrients that are required for the delta-6 enzyme include the B vitamins that she's showing deficiency of, plus a need for zinc and magnesium. And also, do you remember I said about her blood sugar issues? Some of her blood work picked up periods of time when she's hypoglycemic. So therefore, that means that there's not always a steady supply of insulin that would help this pathway to run properly. So coming on to the final part of this test. So I was really pleased to see that she did this kind of the comprehensive part, and we were able to look at things like her vitamin D levels, which are fine. I probably would go just a little bit higher with the vitamin D, given her autoimmune kind of backdrop. Her homocysteine levels, which obviously can be a marker of methylation, is 6.9, so kind of where we like it to be. And then from a nutrient elements perspective, her copper is a little bit on the low side, and that may be associated with a need for a bit more vitamin C, because obviously that would help with the absorption. And her potassium in red blood cells is a bit low. This correlates actually with, we did a set of bloods, and in the bloods I calculated the anion gap. And what that showed was that she was showing signs of metabolic acidosis. So her body was slightly too acidic, and therefore she has a need for alkalizing minerals. So not surprisingly, therefore, to see potassium being a bit on the low side. And then from a toxic element perspective, lead, mercury, arctic and cadmium are all within range. So they're at the low end of the ranges, which is reassuring, nice to see. So I did a stool test with her too. And we can see here actually a nice correlation between the two reports. Maldigestion, need for digestive enzymes, pancreatic elastase looks normal, really nice looking section. So the areas of focus really from her stool test were really metabolic imbalance and dysbiosis. In the metabolic imbalance section, she had a very raised beta glucuronidase, which is about 8,500 on the chart. So obviously issues around detoxification again, with the glucuronidation pathway potentially being impaired by bacteria overgrowing and making beta glucuronidase. What else to say? So under dysbiosis, I think I didn't want to replicate the entire report, so I just picked the salient parts here. But so for this lady, we can see that her microbiome actually was potentially overgrown. So this was probably not very surprising given her SIBO backdrop that of all of those years before, you know, in combination with having COVID and the propensity that COVID has to encourage the growth of gram-negative bacteria in particular. So what we can see here under the healthy cohort line, we can see that the Actinobacteria phylum, the Bifido family, are a bit on the low side, and the Akkermansia category was not reported, so super low. So we had some key kind of cornerstone families of bacteria not represented in her stool test. So treatment and interventions. So initially, when I spoke with her, we had a session prior to basically to catch up and also to agree on the testing that was undertaken. And she was very keen to get started because she wanted to feel better quickly. And so at that point, I thought I would recommend to her the mitochondrial diet. I gave her a choice of two, the mito diet as per the IFM guidelines, or the paleo ketogenic diet as per Sarah Myhill. So she elected to do the Myhill regime, and she found it tough going, to be honest. So she found the whole getting into ketosis. She, although she can eat meat, she doesn't really like it, and she didn't like the emphasis of it in those types of diet. And then she also said to me that she was going to be heading off to Thailand for 4 months. So following a ketogenic diet in Thailand was probably going to be a bit of a stretch. So I needed to basically match a diet to my patient's circumstances. And so consequently, we agreed that we would go with a low histamine regime, and that we would deliberately reduce the carbohydrates, because we knew already that she did better with less carbs in her diet. So that was what was agreed, and that was subsequently what she's adopted and what she maintains to this day. From a lifestyle perspective, she's alongside seeing me, she's like many long COVID patients do, they're seeing lots and lots of different specialists in different areas, seeing cardiologists and immunologists, and I think there's a lot of help out there. And so she had a series of appointments, and some with university departments as well, getting tests done. But some of the guidance that she got from the NHS long COVID clinic was around pacing, which something we've all come across before, I think. Pacing guidelines are given to any kind of chronic fatigue patient. So she's been told to walk no more than 20 minutes each day, and to build up gradually, 5 minutes each week, and build up from there. And in the early days of working with her again, her sleep was very poor. She wasn't doing very well on that at all. So we worked very much on her sleep hygiene. And so I kind of waved her off with a smile to Thailand, and I found myself being very much like her mother, like, well, what will you be doing in Thailand? I felt like it was very early days. I was very surprised that someone that was quite so unwell and so fatigued would be able to deal with, getting on a plane and going to Thailand. And part of me was thinking, well, maybe that would be really just what she needs, lots of vitamin D and sunshine. But then I'm thinking, she's 28, what kind of Thailand holiday is she having versus what I would be doing? So I wasn't really sure that anything was, she was going to be doing too much in the way of relaxation in the way that I wanted her to do. So I've included a supplement regime in here. What I just wanted to share with you is just the myriad of supplements that seem to be suggested as being required by her circumstances, the organic acid profile, and then she's also seeing other specialists besides myself. So I've done some of the rudimentary things that you might expect, where I'm supporting digestion because of the fact she's dysbiotic. She's got that history of SIBO. We've got that kind of bacterial dysbiosis kind of picture. And of course, I'm putting in things like glutathione and magnesium, and we're looking at essential fatty acids and some zinc, and then supporting histamine clearance. Also trying to heal a gut with some colostrum. And then subsequently, with the advent of all the viral testing that's been going on, I've been trying to support viral clearance using humic acid, olive leaf extract, monolaurin in rotation, and also working on an anti-inflammatory basis using curcumin. And then those are the specialist doctor that referred her to me also suggested a whole heap of other supplements that she was very keen to take. And I'm including this in here because I really want this to be kind of an honest picture of what's happening with this person at the moment. I know this is a lot of supplements, this is a lot to take, and I try and prune these back. But every time I take a couple out, she'll say to me, well, you've taken that out. Why have you taken that out? And it's like, well, because I don't think it's strictly necessary. And I think because we've added these two in, I think you won't need quite so much in this area. And she's like, well, I like the other supplement. I just bought a pot, so I'm going to carry on. So consequently, this is a genuine picture of what's going on with her. And it's very much a work in progress. And I'm hoping that, it will soon be necessary, I think, to get another organic acid profile run. And I think then we get another picture of what's going on with her and her new requirements, her new needs. But at the moment, there's a lot going on with her. You know, she is chronically inflamed. We are working on viruses. I should also say that the testing is still going on. We've actually also done some environmental chemical testing, which has shown up some chemicals, as you might expect. And she's thinking about mold testing at the moment as well. So I think this picture is just going to expand over time. But that said, some of these, as well as these supplements, she's also on some medications. So as you might expect, she's on some pharmaceutical antihistamines, so loratadine, famotidine. She's also trialing Immunovir at the moment, which is a pharmaceutical antiviral, as well as being given B12 injections. She has some PMS symptoms, so she's trying cyclogest as a way of minimizing those. So all told, there is actually some decent improvement. So when I first started working with her again, she was unable to cook for herself. So she was having to rely on support from her mum and her brother. But she now has what she calls everyday energy, where she is able to cook her own meals. She takes an active interest in her health. She's still pacing herself from an exercise perspective. She's not getting, you know, very far beyond the 20 minutes a day in walking. She sleeps well, and that's consistently, she's sleeping well now. Mood-wise, she's actually not depressed. She's coping well with what's happening currently. Her gut's improved, her bowels are regular and normal. The herpes outbreaks happened very close in January and February. We haven't seen a new outbreak in the last couple of months. So progress is ongoing, it's consistent, but it's a bit slow, to be honest. So that's my Miss C case study. So I'm going to share with you Mrs. M, another of my long COVID patients. She was new to me, again, a referral from a specialist, presenting actually with IBS symptoms, bloating, constipation. In her health history, I could see many antibiotics. Now this lady's picture is very extreme fatigue. I mean, bedbound for weeks on end. She's got 2 children, I think aged 8 and 10. So, you know, family, home life is busy, and she's very frustrated and very upset not to be a bigger part of it. She's extremely anxious to the point where I had to be careful. So haven't met her in person. I've only met her via Zoom, and I had to be careful with my language because I can make her well up and make her cry very easily. So I'm very careful around suggesting testing or suggesting issues, or I have to be, you know, really very careful not to be a stressor to her, really. So in January 2020, she had the COVID infection and was subsequently diagnosed with long COVID. And her COVID symptoms are very neurological. She has this sensation of a continuous heartbeat in her temples and the back of her throat. She's very headachy, migrainey, and she's also seeing some other specialists, and she's been formally diagnosed with mast cell activation syndrome. But look at her organic acid profile. So I have to say, this was not what I expected. I thought it was going to be like the last one, where we were going to see, you know, lots of oxidative damage, oxidative stress, lots of mitochondrial dysfunction. But in fact, really the thing that is really jumping off of here is the omega imbalance is the biggest component. So it just makes you think, you know, well, what else is going on with her? So looking at her requirement for nutrients, antioxidants, they look okay. B vitamins, stronger picture here. Need for B1, B2, B6, B9, B12, so very much a B vitamin deficiency situation. And then magnesium, just a slightly higher need, 600 milligrams versus 320. But otherwise, manganese, molybdenum, zinc look good. Omega-3, she needs 2,000 milligrams daily as a minimum. And then digestive support, 5,000 IU, digestive enzymes, microbiome, 25 billion. So looking at malabsorption, that looks nice. Dysbiosis markers, yeah, there's a bit of a bacterial picture, but actually a much stronger yeast picture going on here. So that would kind of make sense. And then vitamin markers, they look pretty good. Methylation folate B12 sitting in the green zone, biotin is a bit on the low side. So fatty acids, adipic, suvaric, they look fine. Pyruvic, lactic acid look fine. So her capabilities to make energy at a cellular level, they look okay. And then from the neurological side of things, I was quite expecting to see the chorionic pathway light up, but it hasn't. It's not significant. Catecholamine markers, we've actually got slightly raised serotonin, so that could be an undermethylation because of a need for B vitamins. And then toxin detox markers, so we've got low levels of pyroglutamic acid. She's got some plastics exposure, but petrol looks okay. Oxalates, that looks okay. And her oxidative damage, look at her lipid peroxidases, looks fine. 8-hydroxyclorazine, all looks good as well. So coming on to, so this was the area that was really lit up, if you remember from the front page, and we can see actually from the fatty acid pathway diagram that shows it very dramatically that that whole omega-6 metabolism isn't working properly at all. And in fact, we can see if we cut to the chase, look at cardiovascular risk and omega-3 index, we can see that there is an increased need for omega-3, definitely. So, and actually omega-9. So certainly we can put some olive oil in. Her saturated fats, it's almost like she's not eating very much in the way of saturated fat at all. So we've got to think about maybe the absorption of fat as much as anything else. Omega-6 fatty acids is just not eating very much of them, it seems, or maybe she's not absorbing them. So we did a stool test with her, and the stool test was interesting. It actually showed quite a strong dysbiosis score, so a 9 out of 10, closely followed by infection. So in fact, this actually picked up the yeast component that was in the organic acid profile. And she also has a very upregulated secretory IgA. So although that's done as an inflammation marker, that is the only anti-inflammatory immune reaction that the body does, secretory IgA. So this is her some edited highlights from her stool test. But you know, look at her commensal abundance. So we can see straight away. So the healthy cohort line, she's missing again some cornerstone bacteria. Akkermansia being a bit on the low side, actinobacteria a bit on the low side, the Methanobrevibacter smithii phylum completely absent. And then if we look at what happens on the culture part of the test, we can see, I mean, just look at the lactobacillus, no growth, E. coli, no growth, bifidobacterium 1+. And we've got this switch to gram-negative. So we've got Citrobacter, Klebsiella, Enterobacter cloacae, that are all 4+ potential pathogens. So we're seeing very much. So I always do this thing where I think that in the top box, I expect them to be a 4, a 4, and a 4. So I'm looking for a 12 total score. So I always say that the additional bacteria box should not outnumber the top box. And you can see here that we've got 6 4s, 24. So we've got a huge shift in her microbiome. So treatment and intervention. So with this lady, she'd had the diagnosis of mast cell activation. So we had her on quite a tight low histamine diet, and because of the picture of her gut, I put her initially on the biphasic diet because she seemed to be quite reactive to some of the FODMAPs. So we started her short term just to see if we could make her feel a bit more comfortable. She was, you know, feeling very kind of bloated and very uncomfortable, so wanted to kind of get on top of that. And then what we've done subsequently is after 4 or 5 weeks on the biphasic diet, we just transitioned her into the second phase and then fully into just a low sugar, low histamine diet. So lifestyle, she has to pace herself, and we worked on her sleep hygiene. And when we first started working together, she was bed rest. I would often speak to her on Zoom from her bed, and a lot of the time, you know, she wasn't dressed either, so she would just be in her night clothes. Such was her fatigue and her ability to function. So with both of these patients that I'm sharing with you today, I've seen them every 8 weeks for the last year and a bit. So consequently, the supplement schedules that I'm sharing with you are a bit of an evolution. So what I've done with this particular lady is we have been addressing the bacterial and yeast picture, and then I'm using a lot of the same nutrients that you've seen before, but I'm also adding in some additional body balance oils, so omega-3, omega-6, and if you know this product, Body Bio, omega-3, omega-6 oil, which is in a 4:1 ratio, which is actually the ratio that is found in the fatty outer rings of your cells. So, and again, looking very much as an anti-inflammatory, and actually supporting a lot of the nutrients that are needed for helping ACE2 receptor repair, which is the thing that does all the damage with long COVID patients. She's on some medications as well, so she's on fexofenadine and famotidine, and these have been somewhat helpful, to be honest. The fexofenadine has made her feel stronger, and she has a better appetite from taking it, and the famotidine has been helpful for the burning mouth and the throat and her chest pain. So ketotifen has been less so, so she's actually going to be stopping that over the next few weeks. So the outcome now is she's noticeably happier in herself. The last couple of times that I've been working with her, they have a family house in Cornwall. So I get to see a different bedroom than before, but now what I see is someone that is up and dressed and smiling. Her demeanor is very different. So she's a bit more active with her children. Her and her husband have decided that they're going to move house from their London house, and when she told me that, I just went, oh, like that. And she said, don't worry. She said, I knew what you were going to say. So she's told him that she can't be involved in anything to do with the house sale and the conveyancing and all of that. So he knows that if they're going to be moving house, then he's basically got to be the one to work with it, because she realizes that she's fought so hard to get her energy back and to feel better about everything that she just can't get herself into a downward spiral of taking on too much stress. So her gut is more settled. Bloating is infrequent now. Her default is a constipation, which she manages with some magnesium and some Oxytec. Headaches are better, they're less frequent, twice weekly now, and they are more responsive to painkillers now than they were before. So I think they're less of a histamine issue. And there are further investigations going on. We've had discussions, her and I, very careful discussions about what else is happening. So she's been doing some cardiovascular investigations with a cardiologist, and she has just taken the plunge and just done a chronic viral panel, and we're waiting for results at the moment. But I do suspect that there's something else going on, just because, you know, the way that this test looked, that, you know, there's clearly something else going on that we haven't considered so far. So viruses, I think, are going to be the first thing that I would want to look at. So in conclusion then, I have found organic acid testing really quite invaluable, as it lets me open the bonnet and look into all of these key areas which I think are fundamental to client health. And so that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for hanging in there with me.